Loki's an absolute beast, Ragnir is alive, and Shanks cannot stop the Abyss himself and wanted Ace to become Nika. I gotta say, I was not fully prepared for this to be how Harold's last moments were gonna go, but I'm absolutely living for it. What an insane chapter. What else did we miss? How will things change now that we've learned even more about the Abyss itself, its mysterious powers, and how is Loki the key to it all? Because at this point, I think it's pretty clear that he is. And I feel like it'd be crazy to not just talk about Loki first here. So I wanted to get things started with the true king of Elbaf, which, Loki just is like a major plot point that kind of got dropped in this chapter as well. I mean, technically, there's wiggle room here to argue it, but I think you will see what I mean in just a moment. As we both read in this chapter, Harold straight up told Loki, not Hajrudin, to sit upon the throne and tell the giants that Harold was a fraud, evil, and tried to ruin Elbaf essentially. In other words, Harold, in a very moving, fleeting moment, threw away everything he'd been building towards for literal decades because he finally realized, late enough, but he did, that, he was bad through Emo's possession, I guess. Which I just want to point out personally is fairly validating because if you've been watching me recently, I've been a little bit fed up with Harold's actions during the flashback so far. He had very good intentions, yes, but he completely threw away his entire country's safety for his Ida and his mutual dream. It is very romantic, it's also very tragic, and I'm sure that my girlfriend would love for me to do the same thing, but I don't know, man. It's a little bit much if you ask me. How does that tie into Loki, though, is the question. Well, we do know that by blood, Loki is the cursed prince and the official heir to the throne. But up until this point, I think there's been quite a lot of ambiguity with how Harold's actually been wanting the two brothers to rule together, and especially in the modern day, Luffy's timeline, Hajrudin is all about becoming the one true ruler of Elbaf, despite his heritage. So I'd say it's abundantly clear now that Harold needed Loki to take the throne, gave it to him, and in his final moments decided that Hajrudin wouldn't be king because, well, he was unfortunately not around. Talk about right place and right time, am I right? Which also actually makes so much sense when you really look at Hajrudin's character arc, because the dude's probably kicking himself in the butt right now over being away during his father's death, partially because it messed up the succession, but also, his dad died. But between you and me here, to be completely real, he never really had a chance to begin with, I think, since we all know that he's not strong enough to rule. But had he been there, all of this stuff with Harold's death would have been cleared up way quicker. Assuming, of course, he didn't just get one shot, which, considering we've seen his lackluster performance in the Colosseum, Hajrudin might not have walked out of that throne room with you, to be real anyway, so maybe better for him not being there. And also, can we just take a moment to actually reflect on how powerful Loki actually is? Like, I know we don't really see him throw hands here, but Harold's words and the actions of Shanks and Gaban in this chapter, I think, are really boosting up the Loki stocks. Shanks and Gaban together couldn't damage Harold, even though Shanks himself knows what's going on and has the tattoo, but the king is confident that Loki, with the Elbaf mega ultra powerful hidden super crazy devil fruit, will be able to easily destroy him. And let me know if I'm reading too much into this, but I feel like he also seems to imply that Loki was actually stronger than him, at least before he got the Deep Sea Covenant tattoo, which is kind of insane because that means that Loki was already on par with Zebek. Like, am I misinterpreting this or something? Because we know that Harold and Zebek seem to be fairly equal. Obviously Zebek respecting Harold as an equal. And Harold's wording in this chapter seems to imply that Loki would have been strong enough to already defeat him if Emu wasn't involved here. Which, I don't know, just completely changes my understanding of power scaling in the story. Like, was Zebek at God Valley stronger than Laugh-Tail Roger still? Or like Zebek casually cut the gates of justice down? Could Luffy do that right now? Like, where am I supposed to even scale any of these people compared to the modern era? It's so impossibly hard to do it. I don't know, like, it kind of feels like at least my current understanding would be that everyone at God Valley obviously wasn't in their prime yet, but the top people there were just beyond anything we've ever seen in the story, right? Like, Prime Garp probably stronger than current Garp. Roger probably a little bit weaker than Prime Roger. I don't know. And then Zebek just above everyone else. And I would kind of feel like Luffy isn't on Zebek's level. Again, to this day, I kind of feel like Oda has been hiding stuff about Zebek. I think he has a devil fruit that we're not supposed to know about yet. That's the reason why we get these weird scenes where, you know, when Zebek actually goes all out and fights, Oda just cuts away. So my gut feeling would be that, you know, Zebek actually is still kind of one of the strongest people in the verse, that Luffy isn't close yet, will overcome him at some point, Blackbeard probably too, but that just means that Loki straight up might be on Luffy's level, or, you know, even a little bit stronger right now than Luffy potentially, which is kind of crazy, but makes sense with everything that Oda has been building up towards, you know, with Loki being maybe one of the most important characters for Luffy, or to help Luffy in the final saga. It also kind of makes Shanks impossible to scale, because he should already have been very, very broken at this point. We also know that he's the one that allegedly stops Loki, though we haven't seen that yet. Maybe there was something else going on, but if he did, like, how does that scale Shanks? Does that scale Shanks above Zebek, or what is even going on? I am not a great power scaler, as you might know. I have my own headcanon, which I shared with you right now, but I'm sure maybe you can let me know your thoughts on how you see all these people stacking up towards each other. This was just very confusing, though in a cool way. I kind of like the implications here that Loki is this absolute unit, that either Shanks was just so broken that he was able to take him down, or maybe there were like some shenanigans around what actually happened with Loki, because it's still kind of weird, you know, that Jarul then blamed like Loki for everything and stuff. I don't know. There's something weird going on. So let's just not get too stuck up on this, because chapter 1169 also clears up a few things about the beginning of this flashback, you know, which was part of the God Valley flashback, even though it's been a while. And to be completely real with you, I'm fairly happy, because it's kind of helping steer this plot back towards a question I have been asking for a long time. What actually is the legendary devil fruit of Elbaf? And well, kind of hate to say it, because I've been pretty confident lately that the fruit was the Nika fruit, but now with this chapter, it's no longer that clear cut for some reason. Like, in fact, I'd even argue now it's really starting to seem like the Nika fruit was not kept on Elbaf, and well, that would kind of complicate the series even more than, you know, Elbaf has already done. I do kind of like that, because it means that the Nika fruit wasn't just kept in a closet forever, but was kind of out there. And I actually kind of like the idea that it was just roaming the seas, free as it can be, until Shanks grabbed it even more, because that means there were maybe other people who used it, just were never able to awaken it like the Gorosei said. And I'm sure you're curious, so let me tell you why I think it's probably not the Nika fruit anymore, because it does seem like Loki may have been the figure who was in the treasure room during the beginning of this very flashback. You know, remember how everything kind of started with Harold's death? If you did, don't feel bad, because sometimes I forget that, because we were just on this crazy Rocksteady Zebek run for quite a while. But yeah, before we got young Harold, we saw someone going into the treasure room, and now this version of that moment has solidified that it was in fact probably our cursed prince raiding the vault, or being allowed to raid the vault until he wasn't, because Emu took over. Instead, a talking hammer tried to kill Loki. All right, we have to unravel this, because funnily enough, somehow Ragnir being alive and sassy was not on my 2025 bingo card. And also, I will say, it might have just been the favorite part of this entire chapter. I'm more intrigued by this than even the devil fruit. Where to start? Fruit or hammer? You know, stop. Hammer time. Okay, so the hammer is laughing. It's going like gigi 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 in Japanese, and is flying around. That's pretty awesome. But now I must unfortunately break from the whimsy and goofiness to do my job here. How is that happening again? Okay, so let me break this down seriously. My first thought when I saw Ragnir here was, is Ragnir Luffy's mom? And then I was like, no, probably not. My second thought though was, is Ragnir the man marked by flames? And still no. Just had to do my job as a resident crackpot theorist to cover my bases. But if it comes true, you've heard it here first. Totally serious. Okay, anyway, my first good thought was, did Ragnir eat a devil fruit? Like, on some of those silky, smooth, funk-freed vibe thingies, that would be the most obvious answer in my opinion. Sort of a One Piece staple, if you ask me. Actually, on my patented official theory checklist, I run through the classics first. Did a weapon or object do something weird? probably ate a devil fruit. And that would actually kind of help it fall in line with the parallel, forming between Loki and Shamrock, whose weapon could transform into a Cerberus. I mean, even if that's an abyss power in the end and not a devil fruit, these two should be evenly matched in my opinion, because I have a really sneaky feeling hidden in the deep depths of my really deep stomach that Shamrock and Loki are going to clash hammer and blade, so Ragnir being able to become some creature and kind of, move and like have volition of its own would work pretty well. So if it did do that, then we should probably talk about what devil fruit that could possibly be. And I think a smart place to start here is actually with the hammer's name itself, Ragnir. Like, Ragnir, as we discussed when his hammer was first name dropped, is a very specific name that's kind of hard to dissect. The kanji that Oda uses to describe Ragnir are actually iron and thunder, which makes a lot of sense because I'm definitely getting Mjolnir and Thor vibes from this thing overall. Giant blasts of lightning you can summon from the sky, floating around on its own. Might as well get Chris Hemsworth to kind of voice Loki in the dub at this point because the stuff is right there on the wall. No, sorry, it's not actually on my wall, but you got it. Editor, can we put the hammer on my wall? There is Ragnir, told you. And its official name, Ragnir, could very simply be a play on the words Ragnarok, aka the end of the world in Norse mythology, and the hammer Mjolnir, Ragnir, right? Thor's lightning-based hammer. Pretty simple and clean if you ask me, but maybe it's not. So, why am I presenting this as if they aren't so clear-cut then? Why is the tone of my voice getting a little bit snarky, as if I'm about to reveal some new info that will make you wet your pants? Because I am, and I wet my pants already. Ragnir is positioned to defend the mythical fruit of Elbaf, or at least that's kind of what chapter 1169 seems to be presenting so far. And this actually reminded me of a B, maybe a C tier myth from Norse mythology, not in terms of quality. I'm not throwing shade at the myths and ranking them in some quality tier. Maybe I should, but I just mean like, it's not one of the big obvious ones casual people know. And it's actually a myth about a dwarf named Fafnir. Let me fill you in. Fafnir is one of those mythological characters who's basically a walking PSA about greed. He starts out as a dwarf, not a dragon, not a god, just a guy, sort of like you and me, right? But with a nicer beard. Could be better, right? Then he murdered his own father to steal a cursed treasure in the form of the ring Envernaut, which, as you can guess, gives me an excuse to mention the Lord of the Rings in another One Piece video, my other favorite series, and just because I haven't gotten to talk about it anywhere near enough. So, the reason I get to mention Lord of the Rings first of all is because the entire concept of the Ring of Power is based on this very same myth that we're just talking about here, and I really believe that Oda is a big Lord of the Rings fan himself. If you really think about it, Lord of the Rings has three great ages. The first, where the world was made, and this age where everything was much stronger, much bigger, there was more magic and power in the air. And then the world, which is pretty much the same as the first One Piece world. Then there's the second age, where technology, does its thing and humanity becomes better and stronger and grows kind of too close to godhood, which is the second world of One Piece. And then there's the third age, or the third world of One Piece, where the current story takes place. Pretty much the same thing, and they're all working to kind of break that cycle and move forward into a more peaceful future. The fourth world, fourth age, that's one thing. There are also two giant trees, that you have in Lord of the Rings lore that were originally meant to light the world. One moon tree, one sun tree. They were these giant things that kind of enabled civilization itself that were then corrupted by the Darth god Morgoth and by its creature monster thing Ungoliath. And we have another big scary demon god monster that is collaborating with probably the Hellflame Serpent and stuff. You see, I think that Oda really likes Lord of the Rings. There's a lot of other really cool parallels in these stories, and the more lore we get, the kind of clearer it becomes. I kind of always want to make a whole video about the parallels between Lord of the Rings and One Piece, but my team keeps telling me I should not make this video, so I'm not gonna make it, but I'm gonna drop, some lore on you right here. So, big point is, same shared origin of this very myth, and now I want to show you why, that actually applies to Loki and Elbaf and One Piece. So, looping it back to my big man, Fafnir here. Big Daddy Faf, and I promise that's not my idea for a nickname. One of my team members insisted that I call him that, which, you're welcome. Becomes so paranoid and so obsessed with protecting his loot here that he literally turns himself into, hold your horses, a dragon. That's right. No gods cursed him, no prophecy. He just casually became a worm-like serpent dragon and protected his loot. Sorta sounds like some sorta, I don't know, hell flame serpent? And so, considering that Ragnir is also possibly a play on the words between Ragnarok and the name Fafnir, and it's a hammer protecting treasure with ties to snake gods, which I've been implying could be related to the Hellflame Serpent, I think it's at least worth considering that the same sort of thing might be going on right now with Ragnir. Especially because Fafnir's story kind of mimics what we know actually happens to Loki after this, right? Like, Elbaf labels him a traitor and forces him into the woods and the underworld, where he hides out after killing his father out of greed for treasure. I think that maybe Ragnir might be a hammer with a dragon fruit, and that's why it's actually alive and kicking. And you gotta be real here, how sick would it be if Loki were able to just, freaking chuck his hammer at things and it became a giant dragon that consumes all who oppose it? I don't know, I think it would be kinda hype. It also explained why nobody ate that fruit, because a dragon hammer is protecting it. Like, I don't know about you, but on my personal list of things that I don't want to get hit by, it's dragons, then hammers right there at the top. So, a dragon hammer, yeah, man, I'm pretty good. You can keep that fruit locked up. I don't know, look for the jacket fruit or something itself. Now, I could of course be wrong. It could be the opposite maybe. I would personally love it if instead of a hammer eating a lightning beast fruit, it's actually a giant or a creature with lightning powers who ate a hammer fruit. Just gonna throw it out there because it's really funny to picture a person who just prefers to be in hammer form instead of person form for most of the time because they're tasked with guarding this fruit. I don't know, like the big news Morgans of hammers. I actually also needed to throw out the idea that maybe in a very weird twist of fate, Ragnir itself ate the Hellflame Serpent fruit. And yes, I know it does big scary lightning, not Hellflames, but I wanted to toss it out at least because I do think it's a pretty funny option if Oda chose to go that way. Ragnarok being the end of the world brought by a hammer who wields the power of a beast who ended the first world. Kind of cool, I think. And Loki believing he's the sun god because he tamed the Hellflame Serpent kind of works in a really cool way. I don't think this is the most likely option, but it's definitely a option, the most Manu option on this list. Or maybe it's got like a Raijin fruit or a Thunderbird fruit or some other lightning monster from some other mythology. That'd be pretty cool with me too. Oh, hey, hi, hello, it's me, the guy from the video you're just watching. Quick side note, but after God Valley finished, I was straight up very jealous that Rayleigh got to scoop up Shaki, but now I'm actually not mad at all anymore because I've got waifus of my own right here on Snowbreak Containment Zone, because this here is a 3D anime waifu shooter like no other. With fully upgraded gameplay and new video chat gameplay, the new version of Snowbreak Containment Zone is not only fun, but has plenty of other great rewards too, I think. Because I mean, who even needs One Piece baddies anymore like Shaki when every game update here gifts players with a limited super rare character? And boy, the latest update even introduces interactable scenes with my favorite waifu, Boo Boo. She's kinda got that classical magical girl vibe that all the best 90s animes were rockin'. Pun intended, because Boo Boo is an epic geomancer obsessed with feng shui, just like another total baddie on Elbaf that I now don't care anymore. I mean, come on, seriously, who doesn't love that perfect blend of magical power, kawaii energy, and divination skill? And a new feature where you can interact with her through a phone call kind of makes me want to strike a pose, do, and become a magical boy myself, which I don't have to do because Boo Boo's vibes are more than enough for myself to covered, and it's more than just Boo Boo. These waifu are all armed to the teeth, and I get to control teams of 3 to mow down my enemies. Which after all, is the real fun things we do in life. Who needs a monster trio when you've got these guys here? And hey, even with a super busy schedule like mine, like when I'm traveling back and forth between Europe and Japan, like right now for the holiday season, as you can see, it's absolutely fine because even when I'm low on time, I can just complete all my daily tasks in-game in just a minute with no pressure to spend or commit to extra long gaming sessions. Even though I could probably use that sometimes, you know how it is is when all the family gathers. But new players even get 110 free pulls, and on January 1st, the super rare pull Moxer is available for free, and she's rocking this nun outfit that just screams anime waifu. One Piece could never one of these things, right? In other words, download Snowbreak Containment Zone for free using the link in the description and the pinned comment today. And with that, back to this chapter, which, oh boy, I am recording this before the chapter comes out, but I just assume it's absolutely cracking. That being said, though, I probably should also talk about some other options for what the hammer could be besides just having eaten a devil fruit, because since the anime is wrapping up Eket Island as of the time of me recording this video, it kind of made me wonder, maybe Ragnir might be infused with Haki, like, you know, the Emeth Haki knot. Emeth seems to be a giant that was probably, I'd say, connected to Elbaf based on his design, and that massive 3,000 plus year old factory that's just hanging out on the tree that we've all kind of been ignoring because we don't know what to do with it. Maybe Ragnir itself was Joy Boy's weapon? A weapon infused with his will and Haki, waiting for a rightful user in the form of Loki, and that's why Loki thinks he's the rightful sun god because he's wielding the weapon of the sun god. That would be pretty sick, honestly, and it might also explain why it's essentially talking a little bit. I mean, it's not really talking, but for some reason I just feel like Oda is just giving Joy Boy some insane feats and powers moving towards the end of the story, and the idea that he somehow gave a weapon the ability to chat with him doesn't seem too far-fetched, especially with everything like the Looney Tunes stuff we've seen from Luffy. It could also be a hammer that was infused with the Haki of that Lokiest figure that we see in the mural here in chapter 1138. The one that looks like Loki, and that might also explain why it resonated with Loki specifically, since it could be his lineage thing that Harold knew was in there waiting to respond to Loki, who had the ancient giant part of his bloodline very much alive. I don't know, man, those spiky horns, maybe they do symbolize who the wielder of the hammer is, and with Harold about to croak, he sent Loki into the throne room to actually get the hammer and the fruit in order to have a chance of ending him in this state where he's like invulnerable. Oh, and maybe another option. I guess this thing could also just be a homie. Like, we already see Goldberg. I think it was him that had his dad's shield, who is still homified. Plus, Zeus is still chilling after Big Mom presumably died. Probably not really. Plus, we also know that both Caramel and Big Mom spend a lot of time on Elbaf, so an even older Soul Fruit user might have been here too to, you know, just give life and soul to this weapon. With all that being said, though, it's still just so odd to me, though, that the hammer just, you know, like went up and started floating around. I mean, it's pretty clear that it's supposed to be guarding or defending the fruit, but why? Like, Loki is the prince, not some casual dude sneaking in to steal the fruit. I kind of wonder why Ragnir perceived him as a threat and went on the attack, or maybe he just does that to everyone regardless of who it is. That could explain why, for some reason, it's in the treasure room and Harold has not been using it. Maybe Harold knew that the hammer wasn't right for him and that, kind of like, you know, Mjolnir, the hammer needs to choose you or you need to be worthy of using it, like something like that. I don't know, that could be the case. Or it could be on the Emeth wavelengths of defending the fruit until Loki entered and tamed it. Sort of like a rite of passage, symbolizing the true wielder has arrived, like a little test. And I kind of think this works best because it also plays into the entire Marvel Thor aspect of a hammer that can only be wielded by the worthy, right? So my guess is kind of that it's actually testing Loki, just like Gaban tests Luffy at the beginning of this arc in the same room. Coincidence? And this also would answer a big question I had a long time ago. Why did the Giants leave Ragnir right next to the chained up Loki? That kind of felt like it didn't make a lot of sense, leaving Loki with this powerful weapon, but it does make sense if the hammer won't leave or can't be moved by anyone else except Loki himself. And I mean, if it's none of these options, I guess there's always the idea that someone is manipulating the hammer with a different power, like, you know, like kids like magnet fruit or something, but we just saw that on God Valley. Like, it would have to have made its way right back to Elbaf. That would also mean that someone is hiding in that room to manipulate it, which is kind of weird. The only other thing that could be fun is that it might be a weapon itself that is so old and part of like ancient kingdom or even first world technology that's so advanced it looks like magic, but it's actually kind of like how Emeth is alive, even though it's a robot thing, right? the hammer is alive, or maybe it's even like a shape-shifting weapon. Like, I always thought it was very interesting, for example, that Joy Boy has a sword and a shield, and then Nika has a sword and a spear. Maybe, you know, Ragnir is that same weapon that can just kind of shift to whatever preference the user has, potentially. Wouldn't that be cool? And again, it could kind of explain, if it's the same weapon, why, you know, Loki sees himself as the rightful sun god, because he's wielding the weapon that got wielded by Joy Boy or by Nika, and then he was now chosen as the next worthy person. That, you know, would make me feel like I'm the real sun god too. But honestly, regardless of who originally owned it, I think we really need to ask the question, is this hammer hockey controlled? Like, is that why it's able to float and why Loki is so powerful? Can his hockey line up with the hammer itself? And how does it connect to the Hammer clan? You know, the giants of Elbaf named after hammers who built Pluton, the Galela, this like mythical tribe of people who are so relevant to Rox's plan and apparently also to Emu. I still kind of think that my theory I dropped a while back about Loki piloting Pluton makes a lot of sense potentially. If you haven't seen that one, quick TLDR, Loki might have the keys to Pluton in the form of this special hammer. That's all really pretty good video though, if you get bored later and want to check it out. We're going to leave a link in the description, I guess. Oh, and would you look at the time? There's actually just Gojo on my watch here, but it's also the time. It's time to shift into Loki fruit talk now. Enough hammering. The big question hanging over Elbaf right now is, of course, deceptively simple. What is the mythical fruit of Elbaf? We are at this point in the story once again. What is Loki about to get his grubby paws all over? Let's start by addressing the most obvious answer here, and why it probably isn't the right one, which is the Nika fruit. And just so we're clear, don't get me wrong, I can still see this being the case on paper. Absolutely. Like, it's not hard confirmed to be not the Nika fruit. This is just my intensely deep tummy talking, because yes, Elbaf feels like it should and very clearly is tied to the sun god Nika. The giants worship a god of freedom, and Luffy fits their vibe pretty perfectly. He's been clicking with the giants forever now, it seems. But let's not fool ourselves. The more we look at the actual evidence, the less this seems to make sense, I think. Who's Who, the guy whose entire existence kind of revolves around stealing and losing the Nika fruit, is nowhere to be seen. It also sort of just throws a wrench in things because SHANKS is on Elbaf, and in the throne room, the whole Nika fruit workings sort of required SHANKS to be there to talk with Herald about the fruit, right? Because let's not forget that SHANKS is stealing it from the government. But in chapter 1169 here, SHANKS explicitly states that he's here to discuss the Holy Knights and the icky goopy dark abyss stuff with Gaban. But narratively, and maybe the biggest red flag of them all, is that the Nika fruit represents freedom, joy, and liberation. And once I read this chapter here, it kind of finally clicked for me, I think. Why would it be locked away in a treasure room like a cursed relic too dangerous to be used? That's not freedom. That's, you know, anti-freedom. I don't know. The word I was looking for is containment, which brings me to the strongest contender by far, I think. Once again, the Hell Flame Serpent. I get it, you might be sick of me talking about Snake Eyes Loki and this big old beastie, but I have to, man. Sorry, like chapter 1138's mural makes it very obvious, I think. We see a Loki-like figure marked with the same distinctive, you know, like up-down pattern associated with the Hell Flame Serpent on the other side. And when you really look at things on the timeline, both Loki and the Hellflame Serpent appear too late in the series, and both on Elbaf itself. These two entities seem directly connected, and this fruit being guarded by Ragnir due to its insane power would explain why Herald didn't eat it or wield the weapon himself. Narratively, it also clicks. Loki functions as this sort of parallel and counter to Luffy, where Luffy embodies freedom through chaos and laughter. Loki represents ambition, resentment, and being a beast. So if Luffy really is Nika, the sun god, then Loki becoming the Hellflame Serpent would reconnect them in the modern era, the same way that Nika and the Hellflame Serpent were connected in the first worlds. Together, they're bound to bring about the world's end, and both of them having god tier level fruits based on the gods of the first world also would make a ton of sense, I think. Now, you might rightfully ask, what about some of the other big mythological heavyweights that we get, right? Like Fenrir, the Nidhogg, and Jormungandr, all world-ending monsters, all terrifying, all increasingly unlikely, I would say. All right, so we've seen dream enemies manifested based on these things already, you know, based on Killingham's powers, and Loki is feared right there with them, not as them. Like, personally, I'm very much rooting for this fruit to be like Katakuri's special paramecia, just sort of a power that's absolutely unheard of. And I don't know, Oda could, you know, really throw a curveball and go really weird. Could it just be Hellflame, like a Hellflame Logia, like an Abyss fruit, right? Or maybe even a Sun Logia fruit, actual sun powers, like the next iteration of Ace into a Kainu, into a full-on sun fruit, making him the actual sun god, you know, like, I'm trying to think like Escanor in the Seven Deadly Sins, where Loki can summon actual sun flames, like plasma. Oh, a plasma fruit would be sick. Or maybe moon god powers or something, like kind of what we've been talking about with Luffy, the weird moon and sun connections and how the moon kind of reflects the sunlight. So that might be it. It could also be a twisted version of the Nika fruit. We've already speculated, I think, in a different context that potentially there might be two, you know, sun god fruits, because there is kind of this good, you know, happy laughter person of liberation versus the chaotic evil destroyer chaos thing, right? Maybe there is two Nika fruits, one for each version how Nika was seen by people. And wouldn't that be kind of sick if Luffy is like this jolly joy boy, freeing everyone, having fun kind of person, while like Loki is just this evil, dark, twisted, chaotic, destructive version of Nika, and they're both the same fruit, and together they make the full sun gods? That could be pretty cool. Or it could also be kind of cool if through Loki's devil fruit we maybe learn more about the Abyss powers, because at this point it's pretty clear, I would say, that the Abyss doesn't seem to come from a devil fruit, but it's just its whole separate power system that's now introduced into One Piece. So maybe this fruit could be like a bridge between the two worlds and kind of tie that in better for us. I don't know. There's a lot of really cool options. If Oda went like wild with it and something that none of us expected, I would be absolutely down. But just because I like it so much, let's stick with the idea that it's actually another Nika fruit. Like, seriously, imagine the chaos if Loki also had a Nika type power, which it does sound a little bit crazy until you remember that, you know, the ancient lab on Elbaf we're all still ignoring is still a thing. You know, like Doctor, I copy ancient scientists' work, Vegapunk can clone devil fruit, so who's to say that someone like 1,500 years ago didn't figure this out before him and he just did it based on their work? That would be pretty sick. A human fruit model, death god, like destroyer Nika or something. I would be absolutely into it. All right, enough talk about Loki and his powers and weapons. Let's talk about his tragic life a second before then shifting into all the crazy SHANKS stuff that we still haven't even touched. So, something really important to talk about, at least for me, is the narrative weight of this moment here. I mean, yeah, I do love to get into goofy fun theory mode usually, but Oda's actually cooking up some absolute killer plot at this point, and we kind of need to stew on it for a second. No, stew in that plot. Ooh. Let it seep into your pores and drench us in Oda's stanky plot goodness. After this chapter, I've kind of come to realize that maybe all of my hopes and dreams of Ja Rule being evil probably aren't true. And yeah, I said it. Ja Rule, not Ya Rule. I get it. You want me to say your silly words your way, but I don't care. I say things wrong sometimes, that's my right, and then I like sticking to it and, you know, pretending like I'm right, even though I'm not. So anyways, isn't it like incredibly tragic that this young man who lost his hero due to his father's ignorance and lofty dreams has likely taken on this burden of villainy to protect his own father's legacy and his adoptive mother's dream for a better world? Is there not, dare I say it, beauty and sadness in every single channel of Loki's life so far? Born a cursed soul to a bombshell dime piece of a mom, only to fall to hell itself, clinging to life and hope for his own love. A man who yearns for romance, compassion and empathy, but is tasked with the weight of his own nation resting upon his weary shoulders. Imprisoned while the only woman to show him care was poisoned due to the politics of his broken country's archaic ways. Is there no just treatment for this cursed prince who just wants companionship and family? Also, like, the dude hates his dad's vibes, but still protected his legacy. What a homie move. It's pretty clear that he loved Harold, but is deservingly critical of his dad's flaws, right? Honestly, I just want to point out what a really well-written father-son relationship. I think a lot of men around Loki's age, which is like early to mid-20s, I think, find themselves in a kind of similar boat, questioning the choices of those older than them, but finding care and love despite that. I mean, really, Oda Loki, I think, is one of your best written characters in a really long time. And that's saying something because you're really good at writing characters. That's like the best part of One Piece, I think. I will bring this up over and over again until Oda inevitably, of course, strikes down my hopes and dreams. I want Loki to be part of the crew. I want him to sail with the Straw Hats and not stay and become King of Elbaf, as happened with Vivi, as happened even with like Yamato to a certain degree. I'm gonna hope and be very excited for it to maybe happen, and then Oda's just gonna be like, no, yeah, Loki's gonna stay here in Elbaf until you need him, Luffy, and then I'm gonna be very sad about it at the end of the arc. You can come back and let me know if this has happened or not. I'm already heartbroken. I'm prepared to have my heart broken already. Okay, I think this is enough Loki for today. I know that we'll get some more epic stuff with this arc and, you know, with his character for sure. And I'm absolutely amped to see what, if any, of what I just said actually is gonna come true. But now let's shift into the next, like, biggest chunk of stuff we got from chapter 1169. More Shanks! Woo! Shanks time, baby! Shanks time! Yeah! 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 Alright, I really can't hold back on this anymore. I think it is genuinely so funny that Roger straight up didn't tell anyone he had a kid besides Garp. Like, I mean, I get it, right? Like, there was a serious bromance going on with the two of them, and he clearly only trusted Garp to raise Ace, but like, I thought that was mostly because of the whole government chasing him and his potential lovers thing. You're telling me this whole time, for decades, Scopper and Shanks only knew about Ace because of Garp? That's just awesome, dude. It's genuinely hilarious that Oda went this route. I kind of like to think that Roger was maybe just a petty doofus because all the baddies went to Rayleigh and Scopper eyed on Rapid Gibbon, right? The wings of the Pirate King were not his besties after all, it seems. Anyhow, that aside, we got an insane comment also that you're all gonna make fun of me for looking too deep into, but dude, I will do it anyways. Shanks in this chapter says that he would like to view Ace as his little brother, even though they weren't close, of course. Which I actually think makes that early scene of Ace meeting Shanks feel extra special because they were really only talking about Luffy, but Shanks probably was just so amped to get to chill with Ace for the first time finally. Now, you might be like, Manu, why in the world would you be so amped about, you know, like Shanks viewing Ace in this way? Well, if you are a certified Ohara fan, then you already know the answer to this question, but I won't assume you are. You might still be on the way to that. This might be your first time chilling and hanging out with me all together. If so, thanks for stopping by and still sticking around. I get that the videos are a little bit weird, but if you like them, I hope you stick around if that's the case. But this really almost cements for me the idea that I've sort of just adapted as headcanon at this point. It's my biggest piece of headcanon that I just have accepted, which is that Red Hair Shanks was specifically bringing Ace the Nika fruit at the beginning of the series. That's why he was in Luffy's island. Now, there is a lot that goes into this idea, but the major key points are the following. Shanks was bringing the fruit to Windmill Village for some reason, and we know it wasn't Luffy right after he had stolen it. But now we have hard confirmation that Shanks knew Garp was raising Ace and that Ace was Roger's son. Shanks also heard Roger say that his son was who Roger wanted to go on and claim the One Piece. And assuming that Shanks was on board with Roger's original goals for pumping a baby out in the world, then Shanks would have been trying to make Ace the next Joy Boy, logically, right? Especially after he went up to Marijua, learned whatever he learned there, what he needed to, and then went back to pirating. So, Now what we're left with is a band of Roger pirates scattered all over the Grand Line at key points, such as Crocus at the entrance, waiting for the right people, vetting people, Rayleigh at the halfway point, Scopper near the end, plus Shanks going to give Ace the fruit. This sets up the perfect journey for Ace, Roger's successor, all started by his older brother Shanks, the person who Roger initially gave the straw hat to and named him Child of Destiny, right? All that stuff. Of course, we know that didn't happen, and instead Luffy came in and ate the Nika fruit, stealing his big brother's thunder. Not confirmed, but again, I really think that this is pretty clearly what Oda has been setting up, and this recent line from Shanks added just so much fuel to that fire for me. And of course, in the spirit of Nika, all the Roger crew couldn't really interject because Ace would need to freely choose to do all this, kind of like Luffy did, as is the way of Joy Boy and Nika, freedom being the key to the entire endeavor. And once again, if you've heard this already, I'm sorry, but it makes so much sense because, you know, Shanks being tasked with finding the fruit, giving it to the right person, finding out that Roger had a son that he was kind of, you know, we kind of get the feeling breeding almost to be the right person to inherit his will. You know, he was looking for another D-clan woman to have the perfect kid with, that he named after his sword, who's named after a fire god. Like, Roger was kind of like a bit weird about that. Anyways, Shanks goes, finds the fruit, immediately after taking the fruit, goes to the East Blue, goes to Goa Kingdom, where he knows Ace is living. The plan was just give him the Nika fruit, give him the straw hat so people know, oh, this is the guy who has Shanks's hat, who is, you know, wearing Roger's hat. So if Ace had come through a reverse mountain into the Grand Line, Crocus, his doctor, would immediately know, oh, that's the guy who's wearing the straw hat. He's the guy I need to guide. That's exactly what happens with Luffy. Luffy gets the first information about Laugh Tale from Crocus. He gets the log post from Crocus. Then he gets trained by Rayleigh. Rayleigh turns out to be in the fish coating business, in the ship coating business. And, trains Luffy, tells him about hockey, prepares him for the new world, helps him get into the new world, protects him from, the admirals and everything, and the war. Makes so much sense. And now Gaban is waiting on Elbaf, which holds the key to the Abyss, and fighting the Holy Knights and fighting Emo and everything. Coincidence? I would say no. Just kind of makes you wonder if there's maybe some other Roger pirates still waiting at some other strategic points in the story. I'm still very suspicious that Big News Morgan might be a former Roger pirate, but we'll see. And all of this actually kind of raises a new question for me too, and it's something that I look back into after seeing this comment about Ace specifically, because in chapter 434, when Shanks is meeting with Whitebeard, he specifically says that now is not the time to pit those two against each other in regard to Blackbeard and Ace. You kind of gotta admit that this is pretty funky, right? Like, what did he even mean by that? Was there a correct time to let these two clash? Obviously, Shanks has a little bit of an obsession with Blackbeard himself, but was he just looking out for his little brother, or was there more to it? Like, I really am wondering if Ace's death is a much bigger deal than we all thought for the entire story. Could it be that his devil fruit was actually super important and the crisis was kind of averted when Sabo managed to eat it, since he's still a great A brother homie? Or maybe there's something else about Ace specifically and his bloodline that was so crucial to Shanks' plan. But now, things have obviously changed. Or could it be that, in a wild twist of fate, I've been wrong about Shanks' level of knowledge this entire time? Did Shanks maybe think that Ace was still gonna be Joy Boy despite not having the Nika fruit? That feels unlikely, only because Shanks taking that fruit is just way too specific. Like, he definitely must have known what it was because he went straight to the Goa Kingdom too. But maybe it's that we've actually been wrong about the two fruits that Zebek wanted specifically. What if the Sun God needs the fire fruit to also complete some sort of plan, and it somehow wasn't the darkness fruit that Zebek was talking about? I mean, that kind of feels a little bit off because Ace was very lucky and kind of found that fruit by accident and almost didn't get its powers because he ate it at the same time as his first mate. But I can still see it working only because the darkness fruit and the Nika fruit look so damn similar, right? Like, if my old idea about Blackbeard eating the wrong fruit is correct, that one could work out, I think. But I don't really think that's true, actually. I think maybe there's just a funky thing going on with Ace, or Shanks was just looking out for him. The Nika fruit and the darkness fruit are definitely the most important two fruits, in my opinion, opinion still to this point until proven otherwise. As for some other deconfirmed theories, I do think we can definitely take the Shanks and Shamrock have switched places idea out back and put it out of its misery. I mean, I already did in the video I made on it, but now we know for sure that Shanks and Harold knew who each other were, and Shanks is Shanks. That being said, I still think there might very well be something else going on with Shanks and Shamrock. I still think there's some weird cahoot stuff going on, and Shamrock might actually turn up to betray the government or something. Well, I'll circle back to that in just a moment. Now, something else I'm pretty pressed on, and chapter 1169 didn't actually provide enough clarity on, is what does Shanks really know? Like, seriously, what does Shanks know about everything that he learned up in the Holy Land? Did he find out a lot of the secrets or barely anything? I mean, we do know he just came to Elbaf to warn Harold about the Tier 2 Abyss mark, but surely there's gotta be more to what he's been doing up there, right? He didn't just head up to the Holy Land to learn about the Abyss tattoos, especially because, as we see in this chapter, Shanks actually can't even overpower the Abyss, which I gotta say was not something I expected. Has he just not learned how to do so yet, but in the modern era he can? Or maybe Shanks legitimately also can't stop the abyssal powers yet, which I guess probably actually makes the most sense thinking about it. I just kind of assumed he was all-powerful at this point since he's just so busted and Oda is hyping him up so much. But in fact, quite the opposite was true. He was weak to the symbol before the old arm bite-off thing, right? Which we actually also got some soft confirmation on, which is kind of hype. Shanks telling Gaban, yeah man, even I would be able to be controlled by Emu if I were close enough to them, does kind of explain why Shanks left when he did, because he clearly knew that the Tier 2 would mess up all his plans permanently. Maybe even granting Emu access to control and read his minds. I mean, that's pretty much what we see with Harold. Emu is controlling and kind of shaping their entire, thought process, knows what he wants and things. And that kind of explains actually another theory we had about Gunko, where, Emu was probably toying with Gunko's memories and, what she remembers of Brook. Since she has that marking, that kind of makes a lot of sense if Emu has these powers about everyone who has Tier 2 or higher of the mark. And so the sacrifice for Luffy's sake definitely was this sort of 2-for-1 special, right? Encourage Luffy to become a pirate, make it really impactful, and get rid of that mark, which good on Oda for doing. I do know some people aren't huge fans of Oda clearly giving Shanks a reason to have lost his arm, considering the Abyss Tattoo constraints were pretty clearly not something planned from day one, or maybe they were, would be crazy. But either way, I'm very cool with it. If Oda goes ahead and adds in elements to the series now to explain some less fleshed out plot points or flaws from the earlier chapters, I'm very cool with it because this makes a lot of sense and is a very awesome explanation for why didn't Shanks just, hockey blast that Sea King into oblivion. And as long as it's something like that and not him shoehorning in new things to cover up mistakes he recently make, like if Oda forgets an old thing and ignores it with a new change, I'll be way more annoyed than him just adding in new elements to retroactively give older moments even more weight or some new context. Which actually sort of leads me to something else I still can't quite wrap my head around in recent chapters. Why did Shanks stop Loki out at sea? Especially after witnessing Harold being possessed by Emu, surely Shanks had enough knowledge to piece things together, right? Like Gaban sort of implied they didn't have the full story with Harold's death before. I kind of feel like they totally did. At least after what we're seeing unfold in this very chapter. I don't know, it's kind of whack if somehow Shanks misinterpreted everything here that happened since, he arrived late with Gaban. But still, they were facing Harold right away. I don't know, I just really can't accept that as making any narrative sense at this point. What was Loki doing out on the sea that required Shanks to physically stop him to the point that Loki resented Shanks? At this point, the only two options I can get behind is that all of this was staged and Loki's playing the villain role for the sake of the scheme, or Loki was trying to, kick off the final war a little bit faster and Shanks was like, dude, you gotta chill. We have to wait a couple of years till Luffy's ready and then restrain him that way. That would at least mean that Loki really has no beef with Shanks in that way. He never went on a crazy rampage out on the ocean, and his imprisonment was yet again a noble thing he was doing for the sake of his country, Elbaf. Which then of course kind of makes you wonder, Jarul, are you in on it, man? Or are you not? I just watched you got stabbed through the brain. If you walk out of this and are legitimately just brain damaged to the point of hating Loki for real, then you kind of suck, man. Like, I'm not letting go of you. You're not off the hook because of that. You still seem pretty sus, but if Shanks and you make a big plan or something, then I'm gonna let it slide. But I'm still watching you, Jarul. I'm watching you, like Eminem is watching you. Though I kind of feel like Scopper and Shanks also have to know Loki is good because Gaban is so chill with Loki too. Either that, or I guess while Loki was chained up, you know, Scopper was just talking to him and learned what really happened. Regardless, I think that Loki's plot is extra complicated now because Shanks is here and trying to keep some shady stuff shady. Because otherwise, really, what would be any other explanation for Loki being tied up and framed? Would it be, I mean, it could be that there's maybe someone else, maybe Hush Rugin turns out to be bad, or there's some other person who was actually secretly bad all along. Really, like, this all being kind of a fake thing, and like they're just pretending, or again, Shanks just making sure to restrain Loki so he can actually go crazy on the world government and get his revenge at the right moment would be the only other thing where it's like, yo, you gotta hold back, you can't do this yet before, you know, we have everything set up, would be like the other thing. But really, what's probably the most annoying to me right now with Shanks is just his lack of urgency. And I think by that I mean, what did he wait so long for to warn Harold? All of this could have probably been prevented if he had just explained to Harold what the tier 2 mark would be able to do. But then again, would Harold have even listened? Did Shanks already know at that point? Would Harold have joined the Ohara Patreon to gain access to early chapter reviews, exclusive premium content, and also my unyielding affection? Probably not. But that's all the more reason that you should do that. You should support the channel if you want to, because it really makes a difference and it means the world to me. Thank you to everyone who's already doing it. Be good. Be a Patreon, because Harold is bad. All seriousness though, Shanks not helping earlier kind of feels really weird, right? Like, am I the only one seeing how messed up this feels? Shanks sort of just quarantined Harold's demise by not finding him and warning him before all of this actually just went down. But again, hey, maybe, you know, Harold was just really not reachable until he returned to Elbaf since he was surrounded by world government people. Or maybe, just maybe, it has something to do with the Abyss itself. It's really quite impressive that we've gotten so much extra Abyss lore recently, and thank God, man, because I was kind of getting worried I was going to be theorizing about this power here for way too long without getting any real, you know, clues about what it is. Sometimes it's really just nice for me to just get some hard rules and facts established first. Kind of helps. It makes the discussion and theorizing way more fun, you know, rather than me just going, assuming that's how it works, saying that a bunch throughout a video. For example, we now have confirmation that the Great One, Emu, can command people of tier 1, the shallow Covenant people, if they're close enough to them. Now, how close do they have to be? Is it 5 centimeters? Is it 5 kilometers? Is it 500 kilometers? We have no idea, but Shanks explained that his proximity to Emu was very dangerous after getting the first marking. And I do like getting information like that a lot, because rather than going, I hope that's why, I can now pretty confidently say that this reason explains why Shanks needed his arm removed. It was so he could return to fight Emu during the final saga and not be controlled. See? So much better. So Oda, please give me some more answers, man. We need more. Like, I don't know, I kind of want to know, is Yamato on the way? How do people make black blades? Can you turn Haki into physical objects? There is a lot of questions I have. Where is Luffy's? It's Luffy and Loki. If they had a kid, it would be Loki. No, where's Luffy's hybrid form, for example, is another question. What if Luffy ate Rumble Balls? I want to know how that affects his Zone Fruit. Like, stuff like that. Anyways, I will say that arguably the most interesting bit of lore surrounding the Holy Knights and Emu's powers are the very subtle differences between commanding and Domi Reversi, right? Like, Emu can just erase the conscious will of people with the Deep Sea Covenant, tier 2, as we see with Harold. Harold does not become a demon like Zebek. He is just straight up forced to believe in Emu's will, which is like a whole extra level of scary and next level conquerors Haki, if you ask me, since it kind of means like 90% of these people are still who they are. They've just become dark echoes of their true selves because of Emu's domination. Again, Kind of like how Luffy can use Conqueror's Haki to subdue animals, Imu's just doing that on a next level to people. Which once again, talked about it earlier, like perfectly teases what is going on with Gunko specifically. Surely if she is Brooks's daughter, adoptive or not, she wouldn't be evil the way that we see her, but if Imu's been rewiring and rewriting her entire brain and memories, that's so much more helpful to now talk about, since we can now see that it can waver, like, you know, Gunko remembering some of the stuff before Imu took full control, maybe because that's why Imu took full control. It now gives me a little bit of faith that maybe there are some other ways to defeat the Abyss and Imu's mind control, and maybe not only Gunko, but some other people are actually good at heart, only have been corrupted by the Great One. I mean, seriously, I just want to know who amongst the Holy Knights was maybe not a totally, like, terrible person before Imu got involved. Was killing him actually pretty nice? Was that dude with the cow skull, Loki, a real vibe? Or what about that blonde girl that's hanging out with Garling? Maybe she's actually a real homie. Also, could this mean that Oda's trying to, you know, make a case for the Holy Knights, or some of them at least, to have a real redemption arc, since their brains are not really functioning properly? I don't know how I feel about that one, to be honest with you, but it would be kind of cool. I mean, I want Gunko to remember everything, and I want to get Brook's real backstory if he was maybe a Holy Knight or something. Again, I do very much think that Shamrock could be good. He seemed genuinely happy to reunite with his brother. Could be pretty cool. I don't know. Let me know what you think. But most importantly, what will this mean for Shamrock specifically? Because he's clearly the most important one of all the Holy Knights, at least if you ask me, not counting Garling, who's now a Gorosei. But I don't know. And I think maybe this could kind of tie into Shanks' big endgame plans in the series too, because what if Shanks can break through Imu's mind control over Shamrock somehow? Maybe if he reveals what happens to their mom, or how Dragon tried to save them, or something, right? He can sway his brother over to his side. I would absolutely love to see this happen, because Shamrock has been getting me very amped up lately. Maybe it's the voice actor announcement, my favorite voice actor. I just want more Shamrock. I want to know what he's all about and how his upbringing really shaped him. And really, I just want to see a good emotional brother versus brother match that ends in them actually teaming up to ice their dad. Screw you, Garland, by the way. You're all sorts of problematic, dare I say, and your sons should probably off you. I want to circle back, though, to the Abyss real quick, because, man, it's kind of sus. I won't lie, especially after that sick Emmeth scene drop in the anime recently. And we actually see inside of, you know, Luffy's eye, the Abyss form out of Joy Boy's Haki. Is that what's going on here? I kind of feel like there's just something weird going on with all of that, you know? Like, I don't know, for example, why is the symbol used for the pact, the plus sign in a circle? What does that mean? I actually think I nailed what it means quite a while ago, and if you want to know why that symbol is so important, what it could mean for the world, and how it ties into the giant bridges that Imu's building, you should check out that video right here. Otherwise, thanks so much for watching. Thanks so much to all of our beautiful patrons, and I will see you on Thursday for a special Christmas video that I'm very nervous about whether you're gonna like or not, but I really hope you will. Bye.